Hey guys, Erase here, showing you some tips and things to consider from a discipline perspective for Mythic Archimonde. First off, let's talk talents and glyphs. For talents, it's a pretty standard setup. Tier 15 I use Desperate Prayer, but some do use Spectral Guides for breaking the shackles immediately, but I prefer having a self-heal for the Mythic only phase. For the 30 tier, I use the Feather for the personal speed boost during the shackles and Seething Corruption. 45 is slightly open for debate, but lately I've been running Mindbender because I don't need the mana. Level 60, who really cares? 75 is always Power Infusion. Level 90 is Halo because it lines up nicely with the Infernal Doombringers, and the most important talent on this fight is Clarity of Will at level 100. It has several primary uses. First, keeping the players shielded during Doomfires, which in this case is me, and the tanks. Secondly, you have all those clowns in your raid who can't seem to be moving to stop moving during the Rock Chaos. And what happens when they get affected with a shackle? You probably wipe. So to prevent that, you can give them a clarity at the cost of your meter throughput, but saving lives is really what matters here. Lastly, the tank damage can get pretty high at times due to the Death Callers, Source of Chaos, and Archimonde melees as well. A full Clarity of Will shield and a Power Word shield will negate most, if not all, of that damage. Moving on to glyphs, it's pretty standard. I personally don't use the Holy Fire glyph on this fight, as the increased range didn't really seem necessary during the Mythic phase, and instead opted for Fade for the increased damage reduction. Penance glyph is mandatory due to the high movement, as well as Weaken Soul, also because there's really nothing other alternative glyphs to use. The last thing before we get started, I'm currently using the Intuition's Gift Trinket for this fight, as it lines up nicely with the Mark of the Legion for better timings on Power Word Shield. Obviously, you want to activate this after you cast the Prayer of Healing, because that's already a guaranteed crit. Okay, Prequel here. You see me start casting Clarities of Wills on the initial tank, and I have plenty of time, thanks to the Affliction Warlocks and their need for a 25-second pull timer. As the fight begins, I will start building my Evangelism stacks relatively quickly, while doing some damage to the boss, which at this stage in the content is still relatively important to help your group skip the additional Lure of Flame, Shadowfell Burst, etc. I'm also the one who's responsible for soaking the Doomfires on Arc Pools and moving it out, so I will start Clarity of Willing myself and shielding myself in preparation to soak up that Doomfire. If it's somebody else in your group, just they'll do it as well. So I'll soak up the Doomfire, move over, drop it. It's pretty standard in any Mythic pools because you need somebody to do that. The Allure of Flame comes, I have it, so it's not a big deal. Keep Clarities of Wills because that's pretty efficient. At this point, we're about to push, soak up the little orb just in case, and start building more Evangelism stacks, getting ready for the Rot Chaos, which is just now starting. Handling Rot Chaos's discipline is pretty simple. Start with 5 stacks of Evangelism. Use your Powered Prayer of Healing on the group where it's all going to shield all 5. Sometimes this is the melee, sometimes this is the other groups, maybe a clumped range cluster. And then you go to work just individually Power Word shielding people. I always personally start shielding players that I feel a little bit more risk of making mistakes and dying. And then by the time the last rot goes out, the third one, they can already have another shield. Always make sure that the Shackle Torment targets have shields if they're in danger of during a rot. So obviously this is a wipe, is if they die. Keep heals on the tanks, and in our situation the second tank is moving the Doomfire right now, so I kept Clarities and shields on that tank as well. It's also a very good time to use a Pain Suppression on one of these tanks, as both of them will be taking damage in my case, one with the fire, one with the boss and a Death Caller starting. The next rot begins here. Just like I said, you start shielding, high priority targets that are in danger. Any targets with you're going to be have the shackles on them. Maybe throw some Clarities on them if you think they might die, because if they die, of course, like I said, it's a wipe. Moving out of the shackles, getting back to the main location, and once we plant here, we're going to kill off the rest of these ads and push the boss to the next phase. So right now, when we get here, we're just kind of chilling. Let the DPS do their job, making sure the tanks stay alive from the Death Callers. The new ad wave spawns, trying to do a little damage myself. The shackles go out. These shackles cannot die, in my case. They all have to be shielded. I have my 5 stacks of Archangel and helping do damage. The boss shoves, so we're down into the last phase. The second we drop down, you need to spread out as just a normal strategy because the Dark Conduits are coming out. At this point, you want to make sure you have your 5 stacks of Evangelism built. Mine are already there. So we're just waiting for the Mark of the Legion. So I start pre-shielding some of the melee groups in 1 and 2, and the marks go out, you go to your spots. Make sure the melees all have shields because they're going to blow up first. Then once the melees have taken damage, you know that they're not, no longer in danger. So start on the ranged. I cast the halo as the ads start to fall. Just try to use it there. Just doing some triage at this point, putting shields on targets that might die. We also have a few players in the raid, some Death Knights and Hunters, who are keeping aggro on some of the Infernals, so you want to make sure they live. At this point, there's really not much going on. The Source of Chaos starts, and this is when Clarity Will comes back into play. So nobody has to worry about the tank dying. As long as the tank doesn't fall off, they will be fine. This is when Feathers comes into play also from the Seething Corruption. So make sure you don't die from that. You run faster than most everybody in the raid, so you don't have any excuse to die at this point. Next up comes the Void Stars. There's not really any damage going on. Archimonde's just kind of meleeing here, so I'm just shielding the tank. Make sure if you need to help on the Void Stars do damage, you can, but the mark comes back up real quick. You see I get in a position, kind of caught off guard here. I drop the barrier down because that's really the only place you can use it, and just start, spamming shields back on the players in the raid again. The halo goes out as the ads start landing because that's really the only thing we can do, the only widespread AoE we have. Also, we have the Tranquility go off there, so that's a good time to use any sort of raid cooldowns for your other healers if they need help and any sort of advice. The source happens here. I want to say we're sacrificing this one. Yeah, we're sacrificing this one. So if you are sacrificing them, obviously you don't want to shield that tank because they need to die quickly so they can be rezzed for the other parts of the phase. The Seething Corruption starts now. Obviously no excuse to die here, but coming right out of this is a Dark Conduit. So if you have any sort of shields or any sort of abilities you can do, start shielding players right now to prevent any sort of raid wipes, deaths, etc. Now there's another mark coming. I start shielding up the melee, hit the Prayer of Healing on the melee group, get to my spots. The melees are pretty much all shielded well, so I start shielding groups 3 and 4. And the marks will go off. Any sort of, penance, triage, last minute penance heals you can, use if you need to. Keep that handy just in case. At this point, it's just a rinse repeat with a little bit of overlap on the abilities. They start happening faster. You get 4 Infernals. Sometimes they tick a little bit. It really depends on your raid group, how they do it, and keep them spread apart. I think here one of them might tick a little bit, so if you think they're going to start AoE like this, just start shielding as many people as you can. It's really all you can do. I think there we got a revival, so that's a pretty clutch play, saving the revival for that. At this point, I believe we are letting the tank go again, so you just let the tank die. Just doing damage at this point. It's close. It just, Disc has the opportunity to do some pretty good damage, so just make sure you're using that, trying to keep up the damage. The Void Stars are out. Whatever, doesn't matter. The marks are out. Start shielding. And right here for the last few percent, it's kind of a mad dash to the finish. The marks will explode. The Infernals will drop. There's a Dark Conduit going to happen. Just keep shielding. Keep up with the heals as much as you can on high priority targets. Make sure the tanks don't die. Make sure the targets that are taking Infernals don't die. And at this point, you hopefully get the kill. The boss should die sometime around this point with this current gear level. At this point, this fight is really about just keeping everybody alive, not letting anybody die, so you can save those resurrections for the tanks. And as the Discipline Priest, you're the best at preventing that damage and saving those lives without any sort of major cooldown usage. So thank you guys for watching.